We're going to move now into the Mix It Up section of the program, and at this point I would like you to begin formulating the questions that you would like to ask. I know that there are some journalists who would like to ask questions when they are called upon. We would prefer that you identify yourselves and your organization. The rest of you may name yourselves or remain anonymous. But I want to start with the question to Charles Ferguson. Charles, I heard you outlining in some detail why going to war in the first place perhaps was a mistake and why the war was prosecuted badly in its first stages, which is a separate question from now going forward. Is the U.S. winning, or can the U.S. win? And I want to ask you, what would be victory from your point of view, putting aside whether the war was a mistake in the first place?
Victory by any meaningful standard is no longer possible. I think that we're simply now trying to reach a situation that represents some minimal level of stability and some reasonable degree to which our enormous mistakes have been redressed or stabilized. The reason that I mentioned the way we conducted the occupation is that the enormity of those mistakes and their consequences are going to be with us for decades.
But what would have been victory is more my question.
Oh, I'm sorry. If indeed Iraq had been stabilized, if there had been, as almost every pre-war advisory study recommended, if there had been a larger number of troops, if there had been a large number of Arabic speakers, if there had been a large international constabulary force, if the country had had a transitional period of martial law, and then after that gave way to or was turned into something from a full democracy, which I think that most analysts think was quite unrealistic, but a soft dictatorship, something more like Egypt, say, then that would have been, if not a victory, something that would certainly not have been a complete unmitigated disaster.
Fred Kagan, do you hear in that answer any benchmarks that you think are in the process of being hit?
I'm troubled by the notion that you can simply dismiss the entire question of whether we're winning or not by saying that the sunk cost is already so high that nothing we could do could conceivably make it worthwhile, which is rather an intellectual cop-out in my opinion. It strikes me that one still has to ask the question, what is the situation that we face and what are the probabilities of attaining our objectives? I would say, although I'm fully in agreement with you about the mistakes that were made, I believe that we have actually attained many of the goals that you've just laid out. We clearly have a disagreement about the facts. I do believe that Iraq is being stabilized. With all respect, Sir Malcolm, I do not think that it is likely that you will see violence suddenly explode again, unbeknownst to us, because when you make it when you make it your mission to go around Iraq on a regular basis and to see what's going on in the particulars, rather than having this conversation from 30,000 feet about Sunni and Shia who don't like each other and are killing each other and so forth, what you will see is that violence in a particular area results from circumstances in a particular area. There are larger issues, of course, but it is astonishing how fractal the complexity of this country is. And that the fact that what I would like to do is have a conversation with you region by region, area by area, and talk about what had been generating violence, why it's not there anymore, and why I think that it will not be coming back anytime soon in that form. That's how life really works. And that is what we see on the ground. And we see a government forming that is increasingly seen as legitimate by its people, which is astonishing. We see elections coming up that have galvanized and excited the Iraqi people like few things before. And the astonishing thing is, having spoken with Iraqi political leaders, Sunni, Shia, and Kurds, they all think that efforts will be made to rig the elections. They all think that some of those efforts will succeed. And they all expect to abide by the results of the elections. In my mind, that's a very healthy understanding of what democracy is likely to be like.
Fred, let me bring Sir Malcolm. It sounds like you were contradicted there.
Mr. Kagan claims that winning the war is because the fighting may be coming to an end. Of There has never been a war in the history of mankind that does not eventually come to an end as the people involved exhaust themselves. And let us accept that Al-Qaeda is not going to be the victor in this war, although they've already been responsible for many people's deaths. The point that I have to keep emphasizing is that the sheer trauma, the sheer disaster that Iraq has been for the last 5 years wasn't just predictable, it was predicted. If you go into a country and destroy its government without its understanding the nature of that society, and if you remove an existing regime, you create a political vacuum. And in a situation where Shia and Sunni have been enemies for hundreds of years, it was inevitable that there was going to be this outburst of sectarian conflict. If the United States and the United Kingdom did not understand that or did not accept that, then they're even more culpable. So to say that now we may be in a situation where the fighting may be slowly coming to an end, and to see that as winning the war, as if somehow we can simply ignore what has come before,
General Jack Keane
does not bear credibility.
To an end is a condition that enables us to make political and eventually economic progress. And that is why it's so important, because we could not do that with the hell and chaos that was taking place in that country. The political progress is dramatically real. If you just listen to what this Shia-dominated government that Sir Malcolm just wipes away as not having any intention of building a better Iraq. This government has passed a de-Baathification law which changes the very social fabric of life in Iraq. It's equivalent to our civil rights legislation, which took us 100 years past the end of the Civil War. It permits the Sunnis to participate in the full fabric of life where they were denied that participation by Paul Bremer and our policy back in 2003. The Shia-dominated government passed an amnesty law which will free thousands of Sunnis from jail who were trying to kill that government and return to power themselves. They have done that. Why have they done that? Why have they made that decision? They made that decision because they know that they have to reconcile with the Sunnis and with those who wanted to regain power if they're going to have a future. That is a courageous decision that they've made, even given the limited political experience that many of these leaders have had who've been thrust into these positions in the last 3 years, where there was 35 years of autocratic repression in this country. That is dramatic change that is taking place in Iraq, and it has to give you a sense of hope. Our objectives are pretty clear, and we're well on our way to achieving them. We want a government in Iraq that is elected by its people. That has already taken place and will be reinforced by the provincial elections, which will further diffuse that and make it even a more powerful political model. There will be also national elections in at the end of 2009. We want a country that is stable and secure and capable of protecting its people, and that is taking place and is not a threat to its neighbors. We do not want it to be a haven for radicalism in the region, to be sure. And that has been rid of. They came there because of our presence, to be sure. But also Saddam Hussein attracts radicalism. And I'm not refighting why we went into the war. I'm trying to deal with what we have here and the opportunity that is in front of us in terms of what our realistic objectives are. We have a country that wants to be aligned with us, that wants a strategic political relationship with us that crosses education, political, cultural, and educational ties. They do not want that kind of a relation with the Iranians. They want it with the United States of America. Therefore, we will have the opportunity to have that kind of a strategic relationship with a duly elected government, the only government of its kind in the region, an Arab Muslim country that has a duly elected government and is aligned with the United States and is a clear buffer against a threat in that region, which is radicalism, and particularly in the Iranians. It already is a buffer, and it will be a greater one as this country continues to mature.